Hello everyone, today's story is Around the World with a Chilli. Author Naim Chand, illustrator Priya Kurian, publisher Pratham Books. A level 4 story. So let's get started and let's move around the world with a Chilli. The sun had just dipped behind the coconut, mango and chiku trees that ring Appu's house. The sky was still tinged with pink. The kitchen garden where the family grew brinjals, tomatoes and bottle gourd was still bathed in a soft light. Flocks of birds flew across the sky on their way home. Appu's mother was making fish curry for dinner and wanted some fresh green chilies. 12-year-old Appu had gone to the garden to pick some fully grown, shiny green chilies when he was startled to hear a deep voice. "I am so glad your family likes my offerings." Appu's hair stood on end. He turned around to see who had sneaked up on him. The heavy but soothing voice seemed to come out of the knee-high leafy chili plant. "Don't be frightened. I am Ajjar Uchu, known as the spirit of chilies," it said. "You water the plants every evening and take care of them. I'm so happy to be loved and admired. I am tens of thousands of miles away from home, and so your care means a lot to me." Appu took a few moments to recover from the shock of hearing a voice from the plant. Appu asked, "Where do you come from?" "From very, very far, from the Americas. More precisely, from Mexico," Ajjar Uchu answered. Appu had no idea where Mexico was. Before he could ask for more details, his mother shouted from the kitchen, "Appu, please bring the chilies in now." Ajjar Uchu said, "You have to go now, I suppose. Come back tomorrow and I will tell you more. But please don't tell anybody about our conversation. I will tell you the story of our journey to India and all over the world." Still dazed, Appu nodded and ran off. This little plant in the back garden came from far off Mexico. "What took you so long?" Ma asked. Appu remembered what Ajjar Uchu had said. "Oh, I spotted so many tomatoes that have grown on the plant since I last looked," he said. He would learn later how the tomato plant too had come from the same place as the chili. Appu did not linger to taste the few pieces of fish that Ma had just fried. He ran off to his room and picked up the small globe that he had received on his last birthday. Impatiently, he turned the globe to see where South America was. It was on the other side of the globe. He quickly found the country that Ajjar Uchu had mentioned, Mexico. Amazing, Appu thought. The next day seemed to drag for Appu. He went through his classes distractedly, finished his homework early in the evening with only one thought on his mind, the talking plant. Just before sunset, he filled up the watering can and walked to the garden. He watered the eggplants, spinach, tomatoes and bottle gourd vines before coming to the chili. Just after he had emptied the watering can on the chili plants laden with bright green pods, some even turning red, Ajjar Uchu spoke. "Ah, so refreshing after a hot day. Thank you, Appu." Appu eagerly knelt down to listen to the story. So, are you ready to listen to Ajar Uchu's story? Let's get started with it. Thousands of years ago, Ajar Uchu recounted, Inca gods reigned over the vast mountains and forests that lay over South America. They sent 4 brothers to help the people who lived there. The Inca people grew maize, potato, avocado, tomato, and many other fruits and vegetables. Ajar Uchu was one of the brothers sent by the gods to pepper up the life of the people. His spirit inhabits the chili plants, which became one of the most loved of the fruits. Yes, the voice told Apu, chili is actually a fruit, even though you may think of it as a vegetable. Although it is not sweet like other fruits, it produces seeds from which new chili plants grow. That way, the spirit of Ajar Uchu continues to live. Chili became very popular as a condiment to spice up the rain's bland food of corn flour and potatoes. The kings demanded that Aztec and Inca people pay tribute with a supply of ripe and dried chilies. What is a tribute? Apu asked. It's a kind of tax people pay to the king, Ajar Uchu explained. Aztec and Inca Empire. In what is now Mexico, there was an older civilization created by the Aztecs. They spoke a common language, Nahuatl. Some 700 years ago, they organized themselves into an empire. They had developed a rich agriculture, growing corn, chili pepper, avocado, and other fruits. They also grew fine cotton to weave beautiful cloths and had plentiful gold to make jewelry. In the middle of a lake, they built Tenochtitlan, their capital city. Further south on the Andes Mountains, today's Peru, lived another people, the Incas, who worshipped the sun god and believed one of his sons was Ajar Uchu. They built a large empire that eventually extended almost down to the southern end of South America. The powerful Inca kings collected tribute from the people in gold and produced like chilies and as labor. The Incas did not know how to make wheels, yet they built 25,000 miles of roads. They carried heavy stones to build large monuments, rolling them on logs. Maybe they did not need wheels for carts as they had no horse or buffaloes to pull them. They had only goat like llamas as pack animals. All this is interesting, Apu interjected. But how did you travel from your country to India? On the globe, Apu had noticed the vast oceans and the African continent that separated India from Mexico. The voice said, That's a long story. The foreigners who came to our ancestral land and helped to take the chili plant all over the world actually came there looking for a way to get to India. One day, over 500 years ago, 3 sail ships sent by the King and Queen of Spain showed up in our neighborhood. Led by an Italian captain named Christopher Columbus, they had crossed the Atlantic Ocean hoping to find a shorter route to India. They had no idea that the huge American continents and the Pacific Ocean stood in the way. Why did they want to come to India? Apu asked. Ajar Uchu chuckled. Because India was the place that grew pepper, what you call Kali Mirch, and Europeans loved to season their food with it. Columbus in fact had brought some Kali Mirch with him to show people what he was looking for. He was convinced that he had reached India, and he called Aztec, Inca, and other local people he met Indians. "Oh, that's who the Red Indians are," Appu exclaimed, surprised and pleased at his own discovery. Columbus was very disappointed that those Indians had no black pepper to sell, but they showed him varieties of chili that people grew. He tasted them and found they were as pungent as Indian pepper. He called that tiny fruit chili pepper and stuffed his bags to take it back to Spain, said Ajaruchu. Appu was amused by the thought that Columbus came to look for Kali Mirch and took home Hari Mirch and Lal Mirch instead. Look at this picture where Christopher Columbus meets the Indians. Isn't it amazing? The next day, Appu greeted Ajar Uchu after watering the plants. Appu was thrilled when he said, I must tell you more about the age of discovery." That sounded almost as exciting as a new computer game. Dimly, a large map of the world began to take shape, and the countries of Portugal and Spain and their ocean ports began to glow. The Europeans' love for Indian pepper, Ajar Uchu explained, goes back 2000 years ago, as early as the time of the Roman Empire. Wealthy people loved to spice their meat dishes with fragrant pepper, and they were willing to pay a high price for a few grams of the spice. Courageous Arab and Greek sailors set out for Kerala, crossed the Arabian Sea to buy black pepper in exchange for other goods and gold coins, and made a large profit reselling them to the rich people in Europe. European empires. Europeans had long enjoyed spices imported from India by the Arabs. The Portuguese and Spaniards developed seaworthy boats and navigational tools that made it easier for them to sail the open ocean, and they set out for India by going through the Atlantic. Now you can have a look at the map showing different countries. The map is not to scale. Christopher Columbus ended up in America 1492 and Vasco da Gama in India 1498. They set up trading posts and then gradually colonized entire countries through power of arms and cunning. Greedy for territories rich in agricultural and mineral resources, the British, Dutch, Belgians, French, Danes, and Italians also started carving up the world into colonies. To avoid conflict among Christian countries, the Pope even drew an imaginary line on the globe, allowing Spain and Portugal to take control of land on either side of the line. The line was ignored when the British and Dutch joined the fray. Until India won independence in 1947, India was the crown jewel of the British colonial empire. Christopher Columbus lands in the Caribbean island of San Salvador. The Roman Empire, from a small city-state founded near today's Italian capital Rome, an empire grew through conquests and ruled a vast territory for nearly 500 years. The Roman Empire had people of many ethnicities and languages as its citizens. One Roman Empire was even of African origin. Peaceful and organized civilian life was made possible by an elaborate legal system. The Roman Empire spread around the Mediterranean Sea. 117 CE. The wealth created by taxes was used to maintain a large army and for luxuries for the ruling class. Many imported items like Chinese silks and Indian spices were most popular. After the Roman Empire spread to today's Egypt, trade with India blossomed. Large amounts of gold and silver coins were sent to India to buy spices. The importance of spices for a luxurious life can be seen by the silver pepper pots the Romans used to store precious pepper. A special spice market was built in Rome, and the city's most fashionable street was made Pepper Street. Why were the Europeans crazy about pepper? The ordinary round grains of black pepper that people buy at the village grocer's shop for a few rupees were sold for kilograms of gold. Why? It was the rarity of the item, said Achar Uchu. Traders brought it from a very far and mysterious land. They travelled for months across the perilous ocean and then on camel caravan across vast deserts. Pepper not only made the food tastier, they found it also had medicinal value. Most importantly, pepper was the most precious commodity that you could use to show people how rich you were. Kings and aristocrats put small quantities in dainty little satin bags and gave them away as party favors. So when Columbus promised the Spanish king that he would make him the lord of the spices, it meant he would be recognized as a very wealthy monarch. But with the rise of the large Islamic Ottoman Empire in Eastern Mediterranean, which controlled the trade routes to India, Europe's pepper lovers were at a disadvantage. By the 15th century, shipbuilders had learned how to build sturdier ships which could take better advantage of wind on their sails. The knowledge of oceans too had grown, but still the vast body of water and what remained on the other side was a mystery. The Ottoman Empire. Inspired by Islamic, a nomadic Turkish-speaking people from Central Asia under the leadership of Osman Bey, set out to conquer land from the non-Muslims. His successor, Mehmed II, led a victorious army to capture Constantinople, capital of the Byzantine Empire, in 1453. In subsequent centuries, the Turkish Ottoman, the name emerged from the founder Osman, Empire emerged as the biggest Islamic empire, covering the territory from northern Mediterranean to Egypt and Yemen. The Ottoman capture of Constantinople. Although devout Muslims, the Turkish sultans employed experts from different religions to build a strong economy. The Turkish army developed an elaborate marching band using bass drums, triangles, and cymbals, instruments that were incorporated into Western classical music and even inspired Mozart. The Turkish army also unwittingly introduced Europeans to coffee when they left sacks of coffee bean while abandoning their siege of Vienna. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, the Western classical music composer. You can have a look at his picture, just for your reference. Seafaring, compass, boat building. Europeans were compelled by the rise of the Ottoman Empire to find a different route to India, and by this time their knowledge about the ocean and navigation technology had grown. The Portuguese, who were pioneers in seafaring, had developed better maps and astronomical knowledge, enabling them to sail down Africa's Atlantic coast. They hoped to make it to Kerala, the land of spices, across the Indian Ocean from the tip of Africa. Previously, Indians and Arabs made boats by sewing planks of teak with coir. Arab sailors discovered how to tack against the wind using triangular lateen sails. Europeans also learned from the Chinese the use of the rudder to maneuver a boat. Astrolabe, an instrument that helped sailors to navigate on the high seas. To navigate without sun, moon or stars, the Portuguese developed a fine mariner's compass from a crude magnetic compass originally invented by the Chinese. Europeans also developed the astrolabe to more accurately gauge their position in the high seas. As they sailed guided by the compass, they reeled out long ropes with knots at a specific distance to measure how far and fast they moved. That is why to this day, steam and diesel-powered boats still measure their voyages in knots rather than miles or kilometers. Imagine going out with a torch on a dark night, Ajar Uchu said. When you switch on the light, it shows you a few feet of the road and dimly lights whatever is on both sides. But beyond the narrow circle of light, everything is dark and unknown. This is how the sailors felt when they set out on the open ocean. Over the years, map makers stitched together such narrow views gathered by seamen to give a bigger picture, Ajar Uchu said. There were more areas marked as unknown than known. Apart from not knowing what lay ahead, sailing in the ocean was full of risks. In a storm, the waves were taller than a 3-storied building and could easily swallow the ships. And they often did. Thousands of men drowned or were shipwrecked. And yet, they never stopped trying to cross the seas to find what was on the other side. Why? There was no shortage of moneyed men either who would take the gamble of paying for such adventures. They hoped that the spices or gold or silver that the returning sailors brought with them would bring them more money than they spent. The Europeans, especially Spaniards and Portuguese monarchs, wanted to benefit from the lucrative trade by sailing directly to India. The Portuguese tried to go down south along the Atlantic coast of Africa and find a way to head east towards India. The attempt to find a route to the spices and riches of India led to dozens of shipwrecks and loss of thousands of lives. But in the end, these attempts brought the Portuguese sailor Vasco da Gama to India. You already know about a ship captain from the Italian city of Genoa, Christopher Columbus. He reasoned that since the earth was round, if he journeyed west on the Atlantic, pushed by seasonal winds, he would reach Japan and India pretty quickly. Apart from the total ignorance of the land that lay on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, Columbus made a serious miscalculation which proved very fortunate. Columbus made a wrong calculation about the size of the earth, Ajar Uchu said. He thought it was much smaller than it actually is. If he had known the real distance between Europe and the Asian continent, he might have given up the attempt. To be on the sea to cover a huge distance would not only require more food and water, but also a larger crew and a much bigger ship. Columbus finally convinced the Spanish Queen Isabella that the journey to Asia across the Atlantic would be shorter than the route the Portuguese were trying. With her blessing and money, in the spring of 1492, Columbus set out in a convoy of 3 small ships: Santa Maria, Nina and Pinta to an unknown destination. After several weeks of sailing southwest on what seemed to be an endless ocean, the crew was getting worried about food and water. Finally, on a moonlit night, the sailor who kept watch from the top of the tall mast cried, "Land! Land!" In the morning, grateful sailors landed on a territory that no Europeans had set foot on before. They were met by curious people wearing no clothes, speaking a language that nobody understood. This was San Salvador, a Caribbean island, but Columbus was certain he had reached India. He thought the people who met them at the shore were obviously Indians. The one who actually reached India 6 years after Columbus's voyage, Ajaruchu continued, was Vasco da Gama. He led a Portuguese fleet commissioned by the King of Portugal. 4 vessels and 170 sailors under his command rounded the tip of Africa, and their 10-month-long journey ended in Calicut. This was the right place to get pepper. Route of Vasco da Gama's first voyage to India, 1497 to 1499. Map not to scale. You can just check up the route from the picture given for reference. Vasco da Gama asked King Zamorin of Calicut, "Will you let me take some pepper plants away to my country?" Zamorin smiled and said, "Yes, you can take some plants, but you won't be able to take our sun and rain." The Portuguese soon found out the truth of those words. Instead of importing pepper, the Portuguese settled in India, capturing Goa from a local ruler in 1510. Goa was soon turned into a great trading post, shipping tons of pepper to Europe. The King of Portugal, and not that of Spain, became the Lord of Spices. In a twist of fortune, another Portuguese captain trying to reach India was blown off course by winds in the South Atlantic and landed in the eastern coast of South America. This land was called Brazil. The place was turned into a Portuguese colony, and Brazil proved to be the source of many food items that were introduced to India. While large sailing ships left Goa from Lisbon, loaded with pepper, cloves, cinnamon and other spices, the Portuguese started bringing into India a variety of new kinds of fruits, vegetables and animals from South America. Brazil not only had chili and other new produce, the Spaniards found they also had new products like pineapple, cashew nut, called kaju and rubber trees. Soon the ships full of produce from Brazil left from the Portuguese capital Lisbon to be transferred to ships that left from their long journey to Goa. Vasco da Gama reaches India. You can have a look at the picture for your reference. One of the names for chili in Goa was Pernambuco pepper, after the Brazilian port from which the shipment of chili arrived. Ajaruchu paused and said dramatically, "Goa? That was the world's gateway to India." Goa glowed brightly, and Appu closed his eyes as he imagined the bustle at the seaport with many ships and sailors in different outfits. When chili seeds arrived in Goa, they were snapped up by traders, laughed Ajaruchu, seeing Appu's face. It added so much flavor and taste to the food that the hot chili peppers were passed from hand to hand. They spread all over western India and were known as Gowai Mirchi. It did not take long for different varieties of chilies, long, round, fat, and stubby, and of different colors, to spread all over India and Sri Lanka. Since there was active sea trade between Bengal and Sri Lanka, chili might have reached there from Sri Lanka. Maybe that's why the Bengalis call chili Lanka, mused Ajar Uku. But did the chili just stay in India? No, it travelled westwards. Traders took chili to Central Asia and Turkey and to Hungary. In Hungary, a new variety of chili called paprika was developed. It became Hungary's favorite cooking ingredients, making Hungarian paprika famous. So one of the earliest white plants to be domesticated by humans in faraway Mexico nearly 9,000 years ago became such a basic ingredient that a Spanish priest in the 16th century wrote, "Without chili, Mexicans do not believe they are eating." It spread to so many other parts of the world, said Ajar Uchu. In this way, Goa became an exciting place of discovery. Every 2 weeks, Emperor Jahangir sent an official from his court to Goa to check on any new product that might have arrived from the New World, as North and South America came to be known. On one visit, the official brought back pineapples and a strange-looking bird, a turkey. Jahangir's court painter was ordered to paint these strange things. At the order of the emperor, a special garden was set up in Agra to grow pineapples for the palace. The original Brazilian name for the pineapple was ananas, and that is how it was known in Agra too. Potatoes, which grew only in Peru in South America, were also introduced to the Mughal kitchen. When the British ambassador Sir Thomas Roe was entertained to a banquet by the palace, the main dish was made of the new root vegetable, potato. The ambassador, who had never tasted such a vegetable before, was charmed. Country where a large number of people are vegetarian, the arrival of new produce like corn, tomato, okra, red beans, sweet potatoes, peanuts, and avocado proved a great boon. Not only vegetables, but a whole new range of fruits also made their appearance. Papaya, lychee, guava, custard apple, chiku, and sapota. Its original name in Mexico is Chico Sapote, added to India's already rich and varied food basket. Now you can have a look at the picture. This picture is for your reference of traders at a Goan port. How they used to trade different things at Goa port. Foreigners must also have taken things that grew here, reasoned Apu. Of course, said Ajar Uchu. Europeans' craze for Indian pepper initiated the search for new sea routes, and once they reached here, the Portuguese found the irresistible mangoes and coconuts and planted them in Brazil. Now mango is a major summer fruit in Brazil and Mexico. But long before the Portuguese landed here, India supplied another crop that made its way to the Caribbean islands and South America and made them rich. That was sugarcane. Sugarcane was brought into India a long time ago from Southeast Asia, and Indians developed ways of turning the cane juice into sugar. Chinese Buddhist monks who came to India in the 7th century were intrigued by what they called sweet rock. China's powerful emperor Taizong sent an embassy to the court of Emperor Harshvardhan, requesting him to send craftsmen who could teach the Chinese how to make sugar. Along with some Buddhist monks, 2 sugar makers traveled to China to introduce sugarcane and sugar making. Sugar was one of the key items of Indian export to the Middle East. Arab traders took sugarcane and introduced it as a crop in the island of Cyprus in the Mediterranean. Europeans loved sugar so much that the Spaniards saw a great business opportunity. They forcibly took slaves from Africa and developed huge sugar plantations and exported sugar all over the world. Appu was intrigued by the thought. "So we gave South America sugar in return for Chilli?" he exclaimed. As the sun reddened the sky and Appu knew that Ma would call him soon, Ajar Uchu ended by saying, "You can see how our lives and the food we eat are connected to the rest of the world. Foods traveled without passports. The world is tied together by the food we eat." Appu's mind was racing back to the evening he first heard the voice of Ajar Uchu. Indeed, in his own backyard, they grew not only chili and tomato, but also chiku and papaya. Thanking Ajar Uchu for being his secret friend with the most amazing stories, Appu went straight to his room, took out a sheet of paper, and with his crayons, he wrote in large letters, "Vishwa Bagicha, the garden of the world." He took it down to show his mother, saying that he wanted to hang that on the gate of the garden. Ma was surprised. "Why?" she asked. "It's a long story. I'll tell you tonight when Baba comes home," smiled Appu. And that is the end of the story. Thank you so much. So this was all about the story told by Chilli to Appu.